Okay, so Mars obviously rules the first and the sixth, and Mars is exalted in the third, and Mars is debilitated in the ninth.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it is. I think Scorpio is fascinating.
It is.
It's really because, I mean, we could have, if we had endless time, I think there's lots of Libra questions I would have liked to have asked you because Libra really has this exalted and debilitation thing on 1-7, 7-1, 4-10, 10-4. And that, it's got all the angle stuff and all the action stuff. And here we come over here and there's lots of 3-9, 9-3, and it's a really different. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll enjoy it. I'm sure. Well,
Yes.
I'm sure I'll learn something.
It just shows the different emphasis of each ascendant,
Yeah.
And it also relates to the planets that are involved. For example, when we think about Venus for Libra, well, there is this emphasis towards, again, more like political action or action in the world or service in the world. And Scorpio being sign 8, that is a little bit more away from the world. And, when we think about Bhavat Bhavam, the third house is it the eighth from the eighth? I always got to think about these things. Well, let me pull up the chart just to make sure I'm doing this right. I've been doing videos and thinking about things so much. So if we're looking at a Scorpio,
yes,
there's the eighth. Yeah, so we've got the third being the eighth from the eighth, and so then we've got this Mars, which rules the ascendant, exalted in the eighth from the eighth, which emphasizes this issue of eighth house affairs, of third house affairs, of personal interests, of relationship with siblings, and digging deep into all these kinds of things. So it's always interesting, as you dig into the planets as they relate to the ascendant, what it really reveals to you about how the planets function, how the ascendants function. So.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean. I'm going to learn a lot because I think Scorpio is kind of deep. It's just got a lot of different layers. I mean, they all do, but because of this inner thing. Anyway,
right.
Great. Let's go learning.
Yeah, but that's that's the thing. When we use the term deep, I could just hear someone on the YouTube troll the YouTube troll factory being like, of course it's deep. It's Scorpio. It's the eighth house.
Yeah.
But the point that you're making is the reason it's deep is not just because it's Scorpio and it's the eighth house. It's because of how everything lays out from that position.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, totally.
But anyway, on to Scorpio.
Okay.
So let's get ready.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. We are again continuing on with the series that we've been working through. It's been almost a year now, and we're still going. We're looking at the planets per ascendant. We've just made it to Scorpio. And I'm back once again with our apprenticeship student, Fiona, who for some reason I always thought she was a Scorpio ascendant, but she's not.
Interesting. Well, who knows, Ryan? Who knows? No, I should explain to everyone because we don't look at our own charts in the apprenticeship program, right?
Right.
And I haven't come to astrology with a background in astrology, so my chart is relatively mysterious to me. I haven't looked at it, so.
Well, yeah, maybe there's some Scorpio.
Maybe you know more. Maybe you know more than me. Maybe I'm a Scorpio ascendant.
Well, do I have your chart? It seems like you've given it to me one time. No? Okay. Well, anyway, and the point she just made with the astrological apprenticeship program, the reason we do not look at our own charts, for those of you who really want to look at your own charts, the reason we do not look at our own charts is because when you're just learning astrology, it is too easy to look at one thing, one little facet, one little bit of information and say, oh my goodness, how can this be? And for a Scorpio ascendant, it's even worse because they tend to, I call them the scab pickers. They're the ones that, if something's wrong and there's a little scab there and all you got to do is let it go, let it heal itself. They want to get in there and pick it off and see what's underneath of it so it never heals. Now it's an exaggeration. Not all Scorpio ascendants are scab pickers, but that is often how I've seen them function. So we don't look at our own charts for that reason, and we recommend that people go to a professional astrologer who's had at least 5 to 6 years of experience, so that they know what they're talking about, or 5 or 6 years of study, or 4 at minimum. So anyway, welcome back, Fiona, and let's get started into Scorpio ascendant. Sound good? Okay.
Sounds good.
So we're starting with Mars, and Mars rules over the first house and the 6th house for a Scorpio ascendant, the 1st and the 6th. Mars is exalted in the 3rd house for a Scorpio ascendant, and Mars, interestingly enough, is debilitated in the 9th house for a Scorpio ascendant. So let's just start with this idea of the fact that Mars rules the 1st and the 6th house for a Scorpio. What does that tell us about the general energy, the general idea of how Mars functions for a Scorpio ascendant? What do you think, Fiona?
Thanks, Ryan. So the 1st and the 6th, we're going to link here together the body and the life path. This self of the 1st house is just inextricably linked from the 6th house of health, of disease, of delays. These things are going to be always together because of being ruled by the same planet, Mars.
Right.
And this is, of course, the exact same houseship, rulership as Taurus has 1 and 6, but with Venus as the house lord. Here we've got 1 and 6 with Mars as the house lord. So we're seeing some similar territory that we've been in before. I think this gives the person, a Scorpio ascendant, naturally a direction and interest in health, interest in the body, because this is now bringing in a little bit the signs that these 1 and 6 are taking place in. So the 1st house is taking place in Scorpio. That's what we're talking about. And Scorpio has this natural research and plumbing the depths, kind of looking into things. So it's natural that that's going to give an interest into the body and health, because that's of the 6th. But the other thing that I think can occur here is that the 6 can also be obstacles. We talked a little bit about that as delays. So the having 1 and 6 together means that perhaps one's life path is going to be perceived by the ascendant as having obstacles, of having and because it's Mars, those obstacles are going to be problems that Mars wants to fix, because Mars has got that engineer thing that it wants to correct and improve things and re-engineer them. So, but this re-engineering of problems is going to have an inequality, or it's going to have an emotional content, or a watery content, because it's in Scorpio. So this the knowing of the self. Here I am in the 1st house, and I'm kind of in this deep tunnel type of sign. That's a water sign, that's fixed water sign. So there's going to be, in the intuition of the 1st house of this person, a sense that there are problems that should be fixed here in the deep dark recesses.
Right. And with that, you mentioned the fact that this shares a similar kind of setup as Taurus with the 1 and 6 rulership.
Yes.
So I guess my question would be, you did hit on it with the engineering capacity and the solving problems. A little more detail. How does that differ from a Venus 1 and 6 rulership versus a Mars 1 and 6 rulership? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, I think my take on that would be that the Venus rulership is just going to help ease things a little, because of the Venus is a benefic planet. It's a poetic planet. It's going to see, in some ways, the beauty in that, and also in some ways we've got Taurus is an earth sign and Libra is an air sign, so everything's happening in a very open, earthy way. Right. Here we are over in Scorpio. We've got Mars in a water sign, but also ruling a fire sign. So we've got more. Mars is a very powerful and courageous sign. So we're going to possibly see, can be more frustration if things boil over,
right.
or certainly more action and more, taking steps to, like really being active about the approach to it. But I'm also really happy to hear
Yeah.
anything to add there as well.
I mean, you've covered most of it. The whole idea of Mars being the engineer, the problem solver, the one who kind of who does get easily frustrated. That's one thing we have to keep in mind about Mars, and they can get frustrated about themselves not making enough progress because it rules the first house. They can get frustrated about the subordinates not listening to them, sixth house things. But overall, one of the things that a Scorpio ascendant does have the capacity to do due to this rulership is the ability to really engineer and find a way to overcome the small obstacles that prevent one from experiencing success, right? Sixth house things. It also gives one a great capacity for invention.
Yes.
Inventing new things, time-saving tools. It's good for training. It's good for helping others to achieve their highest potential. That's why the idea of training comes in there. And that leads us to the fact that Mars is exalted. The first and sixth lord is exalted in the third house, right? Which shows that a Scorpio ascendant, the third house does deal with the way we think about things, sort of things we're interested in, our mind and our hobbies. And this is one of the reasons why Mars can be such a good inventor, because it's thinking about the problem, sixth house things. It's thinking about how itself wants to overcome those problems and be better. And it's doing it in a way that brings out this third house energy such that it benefits their peers. It benefits the people that are working with them. It also helps to give them courage to overcome obstacles, but also courage to inspire others to overcome obstacles. But it happens in Capricorn. This exaltation happens in Capricorn, which means that the Scorpio ascendant is willing to do the hard work to make these kinds of successes possible. And the Scorpio ascendant, unlike Taurus, which is having Venus ruling the 1 and 6, Taurus it's okay at doing that, but it tends to want to make things more comfortable because it's a benefic planet. Whereas with Mars is a cruel planet. It's a dry planet. And dry planets do not care at all about comfort. They just want to make sure that things get fixed and things get done. So they will endure pain. They will endure hardship. They will starve, whatever it takes to be successful in kind of bringing their ideas to fruition. They have that capacity to do that, like a scorpion does, or like an insect does. It can burrow into that hole and stay there for God knows how long. So when you think about the fact that the first and sixth lord is exalted in the third, what kind of ideas does that bring up? Anything in particular?
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on lots there already. I think the thing that I would take from that is that if I'm a Scorpio and I want to work well with my Mars, I want to bring it into that practical earth-based Capricorn energy and do the hard work. That's what the blueprint is telling me, that's where my Mars is going to be the best.
Right.
As opposed to the debilitation point, which is all the way over there in Cancer, which is another water sign. So it's kind of giving me, if I'm a Scorpio ascendant, perhaps I am a Scorpio ascendant, it's giving me that indication that the debilitation, I'm not going to be as good. If I take this Mars energy and I make it even more emotional and more watery, that's not going to work well for me when I'm using Mars to solve problems. So I would take that as the guidance. But maybe another insight there is, we touched on it being practical, like Mars gift here to all of us as being a Scorpio ascendant. So Mars's gift here is to bring this engineering to practical level in the earth of Capricorn, and maybe not in the ninth house of culture and religion. Like maybe don't go there with trying to solve problems with your Mars if you're a Scorpio ascendant, because that's the debilitation point. That's not going to be where Mars is powerful and going to have an impact in an effective way.
Right. And that's a very, very, very important, good point, is that taking that Mars, that first and the sixth lord, and sticking it in the ninth, it will have its benefits for certain things, because we do need to remember that Mars will be, even though it's debilitated, in the sign of a friend. So there can be some Logitatia Vashtas, which will help to support that Mars. But it's the general qualities of Mars that when a Scorpio ascendant tries to bring those to culture, when it tries to bring it to some kind of philosophical, even religious kind of realm, that Mars tends to backfire, because the person wants their ideals to make sense in those areas. They want these really down-to-earth, practical ideas to make sense in a place where maybe metaphysics is more important, and physics doesn't necessarily always follow this whole idea of the ideal logical framework that Mars wants it to follow, right?
Yes.
And sometimes we'll get when we get Mars in that kind of position, there'll be an overemphasis on utilitarianism or bureaucracy. You got to like stamp 20 pages before you get this, one thing accomplished that should have only taken 5 minutes. Sometimes that's what happens when Mars has too much of that debilitated ninth house energy for something like a Scorpio ascendant.
But there's an insight for all of my Portuguese residents. We can all identify with that.
How's that?
Over bureaucratization. But that could be a whole nother video.
That's what you have where you are, over bureaucratization.
Yeah. It's a whole nother video, Ryan. Like,
okay,
it's a whole thing. But bringing it back to Mars, a couple of other things that we haven't had a chance to mention there is going back just to the 1-6. We didn't talk about how the link there with Mars and this liquid and the poisons or the medicines or the potions coming from like the fixed water of a Scorpio, creating all of this. So a comfort with all of those kind of things like medicines, leading to 6 that service around possibly being Mars, we know, is great with surgery and knives and heat, and also maybe a linking there with military, or that energy of Mars is going to work quite well 1-6 in that way, in military or in.
Right, and I think that ties back into the idea of the exaltation position of Mars in the 3rd house.
Okay.
Because the 6th house does deal with health and well-being, and the 3rd house is like an interest, and it's the use of the hands, which is what gives Mars, or Scorpio Sun in particular, a great capacity for surgery. It also gives a great mind for thinking about how to fix health issues. So their mind is naturally drawn towards that. And that's why Mars and Scorpio ascendants can be wonderful inventors for things like medical technologies, such as drugs, such as poisons, such as potions, such as things that burn or heal to make something better, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the military side of things is there as well, because the 6th house is a house that also deals with strengthening the body. It's not just disease, it's also how does one strengthen the body. And the 3rd house, when we get the 3rd and 6th tied together, there's this emphasis towards training, towards making something better. And what we see with this dichotomy between the exaltation in the 3rd house and debilitation in the 9th is that you don't necessarily want your generals, your military generals, running the culture. Right?
Yes, totally.
Your military generals are meant to be scorpionic.
Yes.
And they're meant to be thoughtful and logical and precise in how they strike. And they want to protect, their land and the economy and the government, but they're not doing it to be known or to be seen as a cultural figure. They're doing it because that's their job. And that ties us to this idea of the exaltation in the 3rd house with that sign of Capricorn. Capricorn isn't about, hey, look at me. Capricorn's about, hey, what's the job that needs to be done?
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons why, Scorpio makes a wonderful general. Scorpio makes a wonderful general. Aries makes a wonderful soldier. Right?
Yes, good contrast.
Yeah, it's important to think about that. Aries makes a wonderful soldier, but it is Scorpio that makes the general, because Scorpio has that deeper insight, which can see, has the mind for the bigger picture, which we'll see by the fact that Jupiter is exalted in the 5th house for Scorpio, and we see that the sun rules over the 10th house for Scorpio.
Yes.
Which is why general is a leadership role. General is a leadership role, and that's why sun is ruler of the 10th for Scorpio. So it doesn't mean you have to be a general or anything of this nature, militarily speaking, but usually in regards to someone's career or work, that's sort of how the role needs to function for a Scorpio ascendant.
So. It's very powerful, our Scorpio ascendants. Excellent. Good to see Mars here. Yeah.
Yes. All right. We'll go ahead and conclude here for Mars for a Scorpio ascendant. And next up, we will be looking at Jupiter for a Scorpio ascendant. Sound good?
Sounds good. See you there.
Okay, great.